Hey everyone, my name is Jake, and welcome to the 8th episode of Good Timin. As always on this podcast, we're going to be talking all about one of our favorite bands, the Beach Boys. And I think today's episode is going to be a pretty interesting one because we have a pretty unique topic. We're going to be discussing some of the notable Beach Boys collaborators over the years. As I'm sure many of you listening know, the Beach Boys have worked with a number of different songwriters and lyricists since their founding, specifically Brian. He collaborated with a lot of different people throughout the 60s, and that's the period that we're going to be mostly focusing on today. So we're going to be going through the collaborators in chronological order. So we'll start by covering some of Brian's early collaborators, such as Gary Usher and Roger Christian. And then we're going to just work our way through the mid-60s to his two most notable collaborators for a lot of people, which is Tony Asher and Van Dyke Parks. And of course, both of those guys worked on some of the most notable and acclaimed Beach Boys albums with Pet Sounds and Smile. And then after we cover Van Dyke, we're going to take a break and then resume our discussion on a future episode where we will focus on the Beach Boys collaborators from around 1968-ish to the present day. So this is going to be a two-part series, just like our live show discussion was, but I think that's going to allow us to go into more detail on each of the collaborators. So I think that's a good thing. So joining me today for this episode, I have the usual gang of Reilly, Justin, and Matt. So as always, I'm glad to have you guys here, and I'm looking forward to talking about all the different people who work with the Beach Boys over the years. So I guess to start us off, Reilly, do you kind of want to kick off the discussion and share some of Brian's very first collaborators from the band's early years?
Yeah. So before Brian and the band signed with Capitol, they worked with two people, I guess three, because there's Bruce Morgan of Height and Dorinda Morgan. And while they weren't deep collaborators like Gary Usher, Roger Christian, or Van Dyke or any of those guys, they were pretty integral to a lot of their early recordings. I mean, Brian wasn't quite the producer he grew into quite yet, and they recorded a lot of their stuff at the Morgan's home studios. So that's where they first recorded Surfin', but a bunch of the other songs they recorded, Luau, Lavender, Barbie, and What a Young Girl Is Made Of, were all written by the Morgans. So I thought it was worth the mention to give them credit because, I mean, I personally am a big fan of the song Lavender. I think it's a very beautiful song. The others I don't really care for, but I think those are some pretty cool tunes, and there's a lot of cool stories behind them. So the Morgans are definitely worth a mention.
Yep. And so, yeah, that stuff. So I know Surfin' obviously was their first single. That was actually the Morgans actually pushed them to record that because if I'm not mistaken, I think they originally came, the five of them. They sang. I think they did maybe like some kind of doo-wop or Kingston Trio thing. And basically they're like, oh, you guys are great, but you need something that's going to set you guys apart. And then Dennis is like, oh, what about a song about surfing? And then Hype Morgan's like, okay, you got me interested. So then they wrote that song, obviously. And I think the flip side was Luau.
It was.
That was the flip side, yeah, which I think that has the first Dennis vocal. And it's like, I think it's the girls will all hula, boys will all sing. That line, I think, is Dennis. Yeah, I like surfing. Luau's, it's okay. And then I know for Barbie and What is a Young Girl, What is a Young Girl Made Of? Those were actually recorded with, it was Brian, I think Carl, Al, and Audrey Wilson, at least on Barbie. I think What is a Young Girl Made Of is just like nondescript session girls. They're doing the backing vocals. And that was originally released under the very rare 45 of Kenny and the Cadets, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. Barbie is timely, of course, because, the whole Barbie movie and everything, and it's been a big culture phenomenon. That song's okay for me. I do like hearing Audrey's voice. That's pretty nice. You can definitely see she had a lovely singing voice, but the song itself is okay. I am quite a big fan of What is a Young Girl Made Of? I love that teen pop kind of doo-wop vibe, so that's pretty cool. And then, as you mentioned, Lavender is a very pretty song. That was actually a song that I think Steve Hoffman kind of covered up when he first reissued the stuff on CD, because a lot of this stuff showed up on very piss-poor quality compilations over the years. And I think Hoffman actually had to fight to get it on there. I think the Morgans just didn't want it on there, but I'm glad we were able to get it out there, and it is a very pretty song. So that's all my take on all this.
Yeah, I like Barbie quite a bit, actually. I think it's a nice song, and I like Audrey's vocal on it. It's cool how you can hear her. I think there's another recording they did that Audrey's on, like in the late 60s too. It might have been like one of those from like the 2020 sessions. She's on something, and she sounds really good on that too. So she had a really nice voice. And yeah, I like the song. It's it's a pretty simple sounding song, but I like it a lot. I think it's nice.
Yeah. Justin.
Barbie and What is the Young Girl Made Of? They're very of the time. It's very like early 60s, kind of like when Fabian and Freaky Avalon were kind of like really popular. I see exactly what they were trying to go for when they were writing those songs. Yeah, so it was a beginning for the band, and they went on to greater things thereafter. But this was the beginning, kind of like the birth of the Beach Boys.
I love Lavender so much. I'm not gonna lie, I played that a lot, and especially like at night when I'm in my car and I'm just driving home. I play that a lot. It was their first a cappella song, and I mean, I really like those, but I don't know what it is. That song is just has a timeless feel to it. It's very beautiful, and it was actually written by Dorinda Morgan. So I was kind of shocked at that because I really thought that was like a Brian like for a freshman type thing, but no, but very very beautiful song.
I think it has there's an innocence to it that I think is kind of like unmatched. I would say, just how young they were and how kind of before fame and all that kind of corrupted them, if you will, in a way. And all the drama and all the this and the fighting and the drugs and the alcohol and all that crap that came in,
Yeah, Justin, you mentioned like how it has like that kind of like that Frankie Avalon sound. I know Brian. There's an interview from the late '70s where Brian actually is talking about this song. He's talking about Barbie and what is a young girl made of, and they're talking about with the interviewer how rare it is and how it was like worth a ton of money at the time if anybody had it with like that Kenny the Cadet's name on it. And Brian was kind of saying in the interview how like he really liked artists like that, like Frankie Avalon. So you can definitely hear like the influence of that in that song.
And he didn't even own a copy at the time either. I think I heard that interview.
Yeah, he did say that. Yeah, he said he didn't even have it because the interviewer asked him, and he said, "Yeah, I don't have it. I haven't heard it in years." He said. So.
Yeah.
There's quite a few like early Brian productions or stuff that are really rare. Like I don't know if you guys have ever hunted down. I know it's on the internet somewhere. Like that Japanese gray market CD called like "Still I Dream of You," like the rare works of Brian Wilson or something. It's out there. I actually have the flax. And some of those needle drops are really rough. You could tell it was like a really rough needle drop. Like Barbie and Was Younger made were pretty rough. And then I know they have the Surfer Moon, the original version with Bob and Sherry. That was kind of rough.
Sure.
Clean version on YouTube. That sounds really good. And I think it was like the Locomotion with Rachel and the Revolvers. So like a lot of those really early Brian productions are pretty rare. I don't know. Those tapes probably are long gone. So all that is left is like really rare 45s.
I think it's pretty cool. They also did they did a recording of Surfer Girl that was really good. I mean it's nowhere near the album version, but I think it's pretty cool because Brian often cites that as like the first real song he ever wrote, and I doubt he was talking about Surfer Girls quite yet, but I mean the melody definitely. It's on here, the Becoming the Beach Boys. It's on a lot of those like recording tapes. I think it's pretty good. I like the low. I don't want to say lo-fi because it's not really lo-fi, but I like the less produced version of it. But I don't listen to it more than the album version.
It's twin track, so yeah, it's more primitive. Also, there's an early version of Surfin' Safari on there that I think was released on the Areola label in Germany as a 45, if I'm not mistaken. That's a pretty funky version. I remember the first time I heard that was I have the Hoffman CD, so that's the first time I heard it. And then there's also Judy, which is really primitive. I can see why they never recorded that one again. It's not much to write home about. But, it was one of Brian's early songs, so, he was working out the kinks. Then there's Beach Boys Stomp, I think, which is also known as Karate.
Yeah, that sucks. I love a lot of the surf instrumentals, but that one's terrible.
Well, Carl was like, he cut him some slack. He was like 14, 15. I'll cut him some slack.
I don't even know if I've heard that one before.
Beach Boys.
It's on the Beach Boys. It's on the Hoffman CD, too. So it should be on YouTube. If you need the Hoffman CD, I can send you the flax.
It sounds like I'm not missing out on much, though.
If you don't like Stoked, you're not going to like this at all.
Okay, I don't like Stoked.
It's worse than Stoked. So yeah,
I love Stoked. Stoked is awesome.
I'm saying this is worse than Stoked.
Oh yeah, I know. Obviously, I mean, it doesn't have them going Stoked. I love.
Yeah, Surf Jam is rocking. That one's cool on Surf Safari.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
I would when I was like really getting into guitar and like really figuring out like soloing, I would like play a lot of Surfin' USA because there's a lot of instrumentals on there. I wouldn't go along with Miserlou, although I can play that now. But I would play along with Stoked, and I would just like play in the key of A. It was pretty easy, but it's a lot of fun. So maybe like that's why I like it. But I just remember like I'd be playing, and then once I think Mike said it, once he said Stoked, I would say it with him. So I'll defend those surf jams. But do you guys want to get to Gary Usher?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So Gary Usher was the first real collaboration Brian had. So Gary Usher lived in Massachusetts for a while and graduated high school there, but then he moved to California and LA, and he lived around the Wilsons area. He really circulated the music scene in the late 50s, early 60s. He's a member of many bands. But down the line, he was introduced to Brian Wilson, and they wrote a good amount of songs. Some highlights: In My Room, Lonely Sea, and We'll Run Away are pretty good, but pretty much the entirety of Surfin' Safari is Gary Usher and Brian. Cuckoo Clock, Chug-a-Lug, Heads I Win, Tails You Lose. A lot of those novelty songs were written by Usher, but it's pretty crazy to think of the pipeline from Heads I Win, Tails I Lose to In My Room and The Lonely Sea. But it was Gary Usher's first real collab. It was kind of what made him famous, put him into the music scene. So what do you guys think of a lot of those early Beach Boys tracks? Surfin' Safari and Surfin' USA and a little bit on Surf a Girl.
What I think is that the Surfin' Safari stuff's a mixed bag. Some of it is good. The melodies are quite good. You know my opinions of 10 Little Indians. I think that song is atrocious. I do like Cuckoo Clock's melody. I do like Chug-a-Lug. I like because it kind of shows the personalities of the group. I like County Fair's melody. I know that some people don't care for the what's his face doing the barking. What's his name? Rick Vinay. Surfin' Lonely Sea is great. I think that was actually one of the 3 on the demo tape. It was Lonely Sea, Surfin' Safari, and I believe 409 were on the demo tape for Capitol, right? I believe so. And Lonely Sea is great. In My Room is fucking gorgeous. We'll Run Away is gorgeous. I will say that I really think they could have written some more great music together, but I know Murray didn't like Gary Usher at all, which I think is part of the reason why Gary Usher kind of broke away from that whole thing, because I think Murray just did not like him. I don't know if Murray just wanted to keep it in the family or Murray was just jealous of Gary Usher. I don't know what it was. But I think they really blossomed into something beautiful. The early stuff's a little bit more hit and miss, but the later stuff is really, really, really gorgeous. Even still to this day, it's some of the most gorgeous stuff in the catalog. And I just think it's a shame that it ended so acrimoniously, because I think there was still much great music to be written together.
Yeah, there's they definitely didn't get along, Murray and Gary Usher. There's a quote from one of the books. It's either Heroes and Villains or Catch a Wave, but where Gary was with Brian and I guess Murray was like throwing his own ideas out there, and he was like, let's write a song about roses or something. And then I think Gary said something like, that's really old fashioned. And then Murray got annoyed with him and was like, no, it's not old fashioned. And then I think like they ended up like, he ended up getting kicked out, and then he could hear Murray like yelling at Brian down the street. So obviously there was a lot of tension there. In terms of the songs though, I really love a lot of those, especially like those ballads. Lonely Sea is incredible. It is interesting how early that was recorded. Like, it's funny imagining like how out of place that would have been if they had put it on Surfin' Safari. Like, you have all these like novelty songs, and then if they had put Lonely Sea on there, it would have been so out of place. But I do think it works a bit better on Surfin' USA. I love In My Room is just a gorgeous ballad, one of their best early ballads. We'll Run Away is a really pretty ballad. I think that's kind of one that people kind of sleep on a little bit. You don't hear about it too much, but I think it's a really nice song. And I'm with you, Matt. I think the Surfin' Safari material is very like hit or miss for me. Like, there's some nice moments. I think the melodies have potential, but the songs themselves don't like do too much for me. As you mentioned, I County Fair. I hate when the freaking barker comes in, completely ruins the song. They had a good melody going there, and that just kills it. They definitely used it better on that song I Do, which should have gotten an official release by the Beach Boys, because I think it's a great song. But like Chug-a-Lug, I could go with or without it. 409, not a huge fan of it, but I think it's all right. 10 Little Indians, as you said, there's a lot of things wrong with that track, and it's not a good song musically, I don't think, and it's obviously a disaster lyrically. I do want to mention a song you guys didn't mention yet, Malibu Sunset, which was a track that never got an official release, but I really love this one. I discovered it probably a year and a half ago, just like going through some YouTube playlist somebody made of like Brian's demos and stuff. And I was like, oh my God, this is really good. Like, even though the quality isn't great on the recording, you can really hear how like nice and like beautiful the song is. And I really wish they had done something with this, because I think it deserves a release for sure. I think it's a gorgeous ballad. So I'd like to know a little more history on that. If anybody knows anything more about that one, like why it didn't get a release or what the plan was for it. But I really like it a lot.
I think there's a lot of Beach Boy songs that should have gotten releases and didn't. I think that's kind of one of the most frustrating things about this group. you see what was in the vault, and then you listen to what ended up on the actual LPs, and you're like, why? Like you mentioned, I Do. Why did that sit in the vault for 30 years?
Thank
is
him.
beyond. Huh?
Thank him.
Thank him. Yeah. Or Land Ahoy, at least they reused the melody. I know that became Cherry Cherry Coupe. Was that a Gary Usher co-write originally?
I don't think so.
I don't think
it's just the music by Brian.
Because I know that
Cherry Cherry Coupe.
Christian did the later version, because Roger Christian did all the car songs. We'll get to him in a second.
No, I mean, with all of the filler on like Shutdown, you know, I think I Do was recorded around that time, I want to say. So like it would have been better on there over some of the tracks they put on there, like Pom Pom Playgirl and some of that crap. Also, I do want to mention too the song. I know you wrote it down, Reilly. The song Number One, which Gary and Brian wrote for a group called Rachel and the Revolvers, which from what I've read wasn't really much of a group. They kind of it was just like a single or two that they did. But it's a really nice song. It is a good melody, and I especially love the Beach Boys version, which is called Visions. That's another one I just kind of randomly stumbled across on YouTube one day, and I was like, this is beautiful. Like, this is a really nice melody, nice vocals. And again, it's not like the best quality recording, but I think that almost like adds to it a little bit. Like I kind of like that it sounds like some like this old like vintage recording. So I like the song a lot. Another one of those ones that I think would have been nice to get an official release. So
can I say one quick thing about Rachel and the Revolvers? So I think that was some black girl they found that did the singing on that. I don't know if they ever actually confirmed who the woman was, but there was one woman that was rumored to be the singer, and I read her backstory, and she ended up homeless and ended up being murdered while she was like sleeping or something. It was kind of sad. Moving on.
Justin?
This era, same thing as Matt and Jake. Doesn't really do too much for me. The songs, but it is the beginning. You have to imagine like 1962, 1963. Where is popular music? Where is rock? Rock and roll had just started like literally 7 years before. So it's just like pretty much within the birth of rock, they're creating these songs and like trying to find their way. And you can already tell like at this time that the band has something pretty special already. Like within 1962, 1963, they're already getting quite a bit of chart action as well too, and a lot of fans. So you can see, just hear from listening to the songs that they were very special even at this point. But for me, knowing that what I know about the later stuff, it really doesn't do as much for me as the later stuff does.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I mean, the early era is really special to me. I mean, I listened to a lot of it as a kid, and I kind of, once I was initially getting into the band, while I listened to a lot of the Sunflower era and I listened to a lot of Pet Sounds, I mean, this stuff still really hit with me. Then again, I Get Around is my favorite song of all time, so it's like pretty easy for me to get into this stuff. But I really dig a lot of this, and I was going to get to a lot of like the unreleased and other tracks, and Jake mentioned it. I mean, Malibu Sunset's really beautiful. I only heard that for the first time the other day, and I'm like, holy crap. But there's a lot of stuff that they did, and they didn't just, Gary Usher and Brian didn't just write for the Beach Boys. They sent a lot of other songs to other groups. I mean, like Visions that they did that went to Rachel and the Revolvers, became number one, and there's a couple of other songs, and Gary Usher was really spreading his wings at this time, and he was getting into the LA music scene. He became a pretty in-demand guy. He became a producer down the line. Quick mention, Matt, I know you hate 10 Little Indians. That's a traditional song that has a novelty track. I don't think that's really a Gary Usher thing. I think that was Capitol being Capitol in 1962. Why they recorded it still, I don't fucking know. But it is a traditional song, and Gary Usher receives like a half credit on it. So I'll give Gary Usher that.
Well, it's dated. Let's just leave it at that. But
it's so fucking dated.
I want to say one quick thing, Justin. I know what you're saying. Also, rock was kind of in a weird point at this time, because this was in that weird period between like a lot of the pioneers either not making music or being condemned, and the Beatles before what do you call it, the British invasion, because I know Elvis was in the army, Chuck Berry was arrested, Jerry Lee Lewis married his cousin, was a pariah, and then Buddy Holly and all them were dead. Which I think, to be honest, Buddy Holly was the one that was the most, I hate to say it, but he was the one that was the most like influential of that group. But Buddy Holly was great. But yeah, and so I think the music kind of reflects that. But I think I wanted to add on too, like you said, something special. You're right. I don't remember where I read this. Somebody said like even out of those really early records are kind of experimental in a way, a lot more experimental than what was being kind of pushed out when you compare it to like the the Fabian was so bad. I feel sorry for him because I know like he kind of had to make like his dad was like sick or something, but my God, those records were awful. I tried to listen to that stuff one time. Ugh, yeah. But then like the Frankie Avalon stuff, it was just much better than that stuff that was coming out. But yeah, Fabian,
That's where music was at that point. Like that's what people were listening to, and like those novelty songs and stuff like that. That was popular. So that's what Capitol was thinking, right?
Yeah. No, I know. I get it. It's just, I mean, it's like, thank God for the Beatles and Dylan and the Beach Boys, right? Because my God, imagine we kept going down that path.
Yeah.
Yeah. So after the Beach Boys, or at least while he was still somewhat working with them, he definitely became less focused. Surfing USA, you see a lot less contributions from Usher, and same with Surfer Girl and a couple of albums down the line. But that's because Gary Usher was kind of getting into producing. But he also partnered with some other people. I mean, he did the Beach Party soundtrack with Roger Christian. He has a couple of other songs. And he also, as he became a producer, he kind of had some side projects. He made a group called the Hondells, who were literally just all session musicians. And then Brian actually gave Gary Usher the song Little Honda for the Hondells. And I think most people know the Beach Boys version, but that was a hit for the Hondells. I think it reached number 9. So, but Gary Usher was kind of rising the ranks, and eventually he became a producer for one of my favorite bands, The Byrds. And I don't know if you guys listen to any of those songs. I'm a huge fan of The Byrds. I really like Roger McGuinn. I really like their style. It's a very different California sound. But he produced Younger Than Yesterday, which is a really good album.
It's a great album.
Sweetheart of the Rodeo. I'm not a country music guy, so it doesn't really hit that hard for me. And he also produced the Notorious Bird Brothers, which is also a fantastic album. So he was moving up. So I don't know if you guys listen to that. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on the Byrds. I mean, I know we're a Beach Boys podcast, but I think we could spare the Byrds like 3 minutes.
I've never listened to the Byrds, so I don't have an opinion. It's on my list.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm like a huge Byrds fan, but I like quite a few of their songs. I kind of have to do like a deeper dive. I feel like I have listened to an album or two of theirs. I don't necessarily remember the album as a whole sticking with me, but there's some songs I really love. Like I love obviously like Mr. Tambourine Man is a classic. I really like the song. I don't know how popular this one is today, but I love the song Have You Seen Her Face? That is a banger of a song. I wish it got more attention because I think it's great. I think that was kind of released when they were starting to kind of fade in popularity a little bit, which is why it wasn't as big of a hit as it could have been, but I like that one a lot. And yeah, obviously the Byrds were like a very influential band. I know like I'm a big Tom Petty fan, and I know Tom Petty based a lot of his songwriting off of the Byrds, and it's like a more modern sounding Byrd. So obviously a very influential band, big part of like the California sound at the time. And yeah, I definitely want to check out some more of their material because I know they're beloved by a lot of people.
Justin?
I think the Byrds, one of my favorite albums by them is actually I don't think it has any Gary Usher involvement in it. It's after Sweetheart of the Rodeo, they put out an album called Dr. Birds and Mr. Hyde. It's kind of like a country / rock kind of like goes back and forth between the tracks, and it's like one of their last albums before they broke up. So it was one of my favorites.
Yeah, the reason I kind of wanted to like talk about the Byrds, and first of all, Have You Seen Her Face is my favorite Byrds song. I love that song. I remember learning on that on guitar. The riff is so cool. The reason I mentioned it is because David Crosby said Gary Usher was a bad producer, and I don't know. I mean, Younger Than Yesterday is one of my favorite Byrds albums. It's somewhere in my top 100 favorite albums. I don't know if I agree with his statement. I mean, I'm usually team David Crosby, but I think that's kind of a douchey thing to say. So I don't know. I mean, you guys said you don't really listen to much of Gary's or those albums that Gary was on, but do you guys think he's a bad producer? I mean,
I don't hear
not. No.
Yeah, I don't hear anything wrong with those songs, and I think they've stood the test of time because millions of people still listen to them every year. So I mean, I think obviously some artists are very picky, and I think David Crosby said some other stuff too. He's gotten into some beef with other artists before too, so I don't know if that's really anything that surprising from him. But yeah, personally, I don't hear anything wrong with his production from what I've heard.
Yeah, I mean, I like I said, I like David Crosby, but what do you mean by that? Like, elaborate on why Gary Usher is a bad producer. I mean, I like all of these songs, and Younger Than Yesterday is, I think it's like maybe my number one, maybe my number two favorite Birds album. I really like Mr. Tambourine Man. But like, I don't hear anything wrong with it. And he's done a lot of producing. And we'll actually see that on the kind of the next topic with Sagittarius. I don't think he's a bad producer. I think he's done a lot of good work. So on the topic Sagittarius, that was a group that started off as just like a side project again with Usher. He was producing Chad and Jeremy. He offered them a song and they said no. So Usher said, screw that, I'll do this myself. And he had help for the one song, My World Fell Down, from Bruce Johnson, Glenn Campbell, and Terry Melcher, who are all very big in Beach Boys, like, circle of friends.
All connected, yeah.
Yeah. And I personally really like My World Fell Down, but that ended up, because of the success, they asked I think it's Columbia who he was working for at the time, asked him to make a whole album, and that has a lot of cool sounds. I mean, I think it's all right. I don't think it's like a freaking masterpiece, but a couple good songs in there. I don't know if you guys listen to Sagittarius at all.
Yeah, I have listened to the album before. I think I discovered it probably about like 2 years ago, I would say. I just came across it one day. It was on like a playlist, and I just started going through it. There's some songs I really like on there. I love the song Another Time. I think that's a really pretty one. I like the song Song to the Magic Frog. I think that's a good one, too. It's got a real nice melody to it, good harmonies. And yeah, My World Fell Down is really cool. I think I read a quote from one of the books, and I think it said something like Brian heard this song one day and he kind of like freaked out because it sounded so much like something that he would have written, but it wasn't him. And I think he was like kind of like baffled by it when he heard it. I think I read that somewhere. But yeah, it does really sound like it could have been written by Brian, or like that Brian was involved with it, even though he wasn't. But yeah, it's a really cool album. I would definitely recommend giving it a listen if any of our listeners haven't heard it before. Like you said, Reilly, I wouldn't say it's not a complete masterpiece to me, but I think everybody can probably find something to like on there, especially if you're a Beach Boys fan. So,
Justin?
Sagittarius. I haven't heard that album for a long time. I remember discovering it for the first time, would have been like in the 90s sometime, when I first heard about the Bruce Johnston contribution to it. I thought it was a really great album, very melodic, very Beach Boys-esque. There was a lot of these kind of side projects going around between like different like people around the Beach Boys that were kind of like sunshine pop, kind of like psychedelic, kind of albums at this time that were very, very Beach Boys influenced. And I think this is one of them as well. And yeah, it's just been so long since I've heard it, but I remember it being very melodic, and it was a great listen. I should probably go and search for it again.
Yeah.
Justin, you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say, like, if you like sunshine pop, like if you're into like album like Sunflower, which has a lot of that style on it too, I think you might really like this album. Also, like you mentioned, there were several different groups that were kind of like these studio groups that existed. There's another one, I think it's called the Millennium. And they have also like a sunshine pop type album that's really good. There's some really nice songs on that as well. So these are albums that are kind of obscure today, but like they're definitely worth listening to if you like that kind of sound. That sound.
Is it similar to like the Monkees Pisces album? Because that's very like kind of sunshine pop, right?
A little bit, I would say. Yeah,
love that album.
You took the words right
out
out
of
my
mouth.
mouth.
A little bit different than Monkees. A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, because that's kind of, I know it has some sunshine pop in it, and I love that record. That's a great record.
Yeah, Jake, I was going to mention the Millennium.
Yeah,
that's a fantastic album. I was going to say that, and then you like took it right from me, but that's all right. Yeah, but I mean, kind of after this point, Gary Usher, like, he was just kind of around. He didn't really do a whole lot. He did come back in the 80s and wrote a couple of songs with Brian. Nothing really worth too much mention. I mean, they're all right. There was a whole session tape that they did from, I think, 86, 87 in the Landy years. So he was definitely very forced. But the thing with Landy was kind of the same thing with Murray, was Landy really wanted that control, and he really wanted to like be Brian's collaborator. And yeah, they butt heads.
Yeah.
So eventually they just kind of fell out, and it kind of sucks because Gary Usher died relatively young in 1990, which is really sad because in my opinion, and maybe we could talk about this later, I think him and Brian really connected, especially on those ballads. especially those early ballads like In My Room, Lonely Sea. That's where they really hit, and those are some of my favorite Beach Boys songs. In My Room was in my top 10 favorite Beach Boys songs, so I think it's kind of sad. I feel like maybe sometime in the 80s or 90s they could have come together and something could have happened, but it didn't happen because he died really young.
If I'm not mistaken, wasn't he like dying of cancer and was trying to get a hold of Brian, and Landy was just like blocking him from like doing anything? Yeah, that's
Yep.
sad.
Yeah, especially he was his first collaborator, like serious one, anyways. In like they got together in '86, and then Landy said, "No, I don't like you," and he wanted that. That is really sad. I remember hearing that story. Anyways, you guys want to get to Roger Christian?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Oh yeah, I love Roger Christian because if you guys remember the album ranking videos, I was a big fan of Little Deuce Coupe. I don't know why. I mean, I do know why. It's the doo-wop influence, but Roger Christian has a very cool style to him. He seems like a very cool dude. I mean, after all, he's a radio personality in LA. He became known as the poet of the strip, and he was actually playing 409 when Murray heard him and kind of researched about him and figured out he was the poet of the strip, and he recruited him to help Brian write a bunch of car songs because as the surf songs were kind of getting lower in popularity, the car songs were rising, and he's like, oh yeah, let's get this guy. And so they kind of got together, and Christian wrote a lot of poems about cars, and he wrote a lot of cool songs with Brian. Shut Down and Little Deuce Coupe are a bit faster paced, kind of the opposite of Gary Usher. And then most of the Little Deuce Coupe album was written with Christian. I mean, I'm a big fan. I like Spirit of America, Ballad of Old Betsy, Car Crazy Cutie, Cherry Cherry Coupe, and I'm not gonna lie, I kind of got into No Go Showboat. So, I mean, what do you guys think of Little Deuce Coupe and a lot of the songs Christian collaborated?
The best one there for me is probably Car Crazy Cutie. That song slaps. The intro, the run, and do run, and then the drums come in. Well, my steady little doll is a real life. That's a great song. I really like that one's good. I like Cherry Cherry Coupe too, which I think that reuses the Land Ahoy melody we were talking about earlier. Yeah, that one's good. That album's kind of for me because it does have a lot of repeats. Custom Machine's all right. No Go Showboat's decent. Spirit of America's good. Young Man Is Gone is I don't know. I get what Mike was trying to, and that's not Roger Christian. I get what Mike was trying to do with that song, but I don't know if it quite works for me. But yeah, I like some of those Roger Christian songs. Of course, I know we're probably going to get to it, but he did write one of the best songs. We'll get to that one in a minute, obviously. But yeah, I think the Little Deuce Coupe album is solid. I wouldn't put it like in my top 10 or anything like that, but it's a solid early effort. It is also kind of like a cool early concept album, which is cool. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it. Do love Cherry Cherry Coupe and Car
I know
Crazy Coupe.
Jake hates this album.
Okay, I don't hate it. It's not a favorite of mine. Like there's some songs on it I enjoy. I like the title track, Little Deuce Coupe, but like you said, Matt, like they're recycling it from an album that already had come out with Surfer Girl. But yeah, I like that song. I like Ballad of Old Betsy is nice. Like I don't think it's a top-notch Brian Wilson ballad, but it's a nice little song. The rest I'm kind of just mixed on. Like Spirit of America is okay, but like it's not a song I would choose to put on. Car Crazy Cutie has a okay melody, but it's kind of the same thing. Cherry Cherry Coupe, No Go Showboat don't really do much for me. And yeah, I think the most interesting part of the album, which I think you mentioned, Matt, is that like it's kind of like an early concept album in a way. I think it's cool that like all the songs are about like cars. I think that's interesting. But beyond that, these songs kind of feel a little bit lackluster to me. As I mentioned to Reilly before, like on the album ranking we did, I don't think I'm necessarily the biggest doo-wop fan. There's some doo-wop songs that I like, but I wouldn't say I'm like a huge fan of the genre. So maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe if I can get more into that genre, that style of music, I could maybe get more into the album. But I just don't think it's the most interesting album. Also, I'm not crazy about Shut Down, which I've mentioned before. I don't think it's bad. But it's not a bad single, but I just don't think it's not something that I listen to or choose to put on much. So,
Justin.
So I'd say with this album, you're starting to see the band kind of growing a little bit more, and you could see that they're kind of moving on to bigger and better things. I actually really love Shut Down. I used to love it as a kid, especially. A lot of these songs, it's hard for me to rank them now because I did listen to them so much as a kid, so they're kind of a little bit overplayed for me. and now knowing what I know about the later Beach Boys, it's tough to go back, but you can see that there is a really special band, and like Matt said with the concept album, that was something that was very not unheard of at the time, but it was kind of unusual in the rock kind of genre. Um, yeah, like a lot of these songs, like "Car Crazy Cutie." This song reminds me so much of "The Wanderer" by Dion. I think that's what they were trying to channel with this, because they were actually doing that song in concert at the time too. So it's kind of like very doo-wop influenced, and yeah, we're still in the early days of rock, and I think for 1963, this is a really solid album.
Yeah, just add on to what you were saying concept albums. I think probably the first concept was probably that Frank Sinatra album, right? Like in the wee small hours, or whatever it's called. One of the first concept albums, and that was not, obviously that's not rock. Sinatra was the antithesis of rock.
Yeah.
Rock concept album was probably one of the first ones for sure.
I think it was an accidental concept album. I think they chose to make it all about cars, but I don't think it was let's make this a concept album. But I think for an album that was written in 4 weeks, this is pretty damn impressive. That's why they recycled a lot of songs, and I think if they gave Brian, and since Christian was kind of his go-to guy for this, Roger Christian, a bit more time, they probably could have come up with something a lot better. But who knows, then maybe we wouldn't have had some of those really good songs on Shutdown Volume 2, which I also wanted to talk about. So who knows? But Shutdown Volume 2, there was only, I think, 2 contributions from Christian. But they are also on one really good song and one that's all right. Don't Worry Baby was written with Roger Christian, and I think that was that was easily the best collab between the two. I know Brian was trying to, and I've seen people say that he is ripping off Be My Baby, and I'll always come to Brian's defense on that. He literally wrote it for the Ronettes, and then Spector said no. And so we took it back and made it, and it became one of their best-selling songs at that point. I've seen, I like JT Curtis. He's a really good YouTuber. He does a lot of Pink Floyd videos. He does a lot of album ranking videos, and he does a lot of like cool music stuff. But yeah, in his History of Rock video, he mentioned that Brian stole this song from the Ronettes, and I'm like, no. He literally wrote it for them as the sequel to Be My Baby, which was his favorite song. And again, they said no, and he just released it on his own. But easily the best Christian contribution. I actually first listened, I didn't know this was about car racing. I just thought it was another Be My Baby, which is also really one of my favorite songs too. And then I looked at the lyrics and I'm like, oh, and I still love it just as much. It's one of my favorite Beach Boys songs. The other one was This Car of Mine, but I don't think you guys really care about. Or was it? No, I think it was In the Parking Lot.
The parking lot.
Yeah.
I do like that song. I like the change. It kind of starts off slow and then it goes really fast and then it goes slow. So.
Yeah, I love the tempo changes in that song. Very, very ahead of its time for 64. I think you said everything needs to be said about Don't Worry Baby. One of their best songs. A beautiful song. A song about cars, but it can also easily be reinterpreted as a great love ballad. Wonderful song. I think it and I Get Around probably one of the greatest double-sided singles out there. I will say too, I know we just finished with Gary Usher, but Pom Pom Playgirl is a Gary Usher co-write. That song's all right. It's not much to write home about.
I purposely left it out because of Jake. He hates that song.
Not that bad, but it's not that great either. I don't, it's not the worst song on here. It's not the freaking cover of Louie Louie. That's the worst.
It's not Take a Load Off Your Feet. That's for sure.
That song isn't that bad either. About 10 Little Indians, right? That's the worst Gary Usher co-write. But yeah, no. Don't Worry Baby and In the Parking Lot, great songs. Especially Don't Worry Baby. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
Yeah, I think with Don't Worry Baby, so like obviously like there's a lot of comparisons you can make between that song and Be My Baby. For me, those songs are like neck and neck for which one I love more. Like I think they're both just like top-notch songs. I listen to them both a lot. I do think lyrically, Don't Worry Baby has Be My Baby beat because I think it's more interesting. I think there's more going on lyrically. You have like the theme of like, he's going to go into this car race, but then also you have the themes of like love and romance along with that. Where like Be My Baby, it's more just your general love song lyrics, but I think there's more going on with Don't Worry Baby. So really great lyrics to that one and just a great song in general. I think that's crazy that that guy was saying that it's ripping off Be My Baby because to me, most ripoffs, like if you call a song a ripoff, usually you say, well, that song's inferior to that song. To me, this song challenges Be My Baby as almost being better than it. I think it's like a great response to it. You can hear the influence of it, but it's by no means a ripoff, in my opinion. It's different melodically. It's just a different song. I love the production on it too. And In the Parking Lot is nice. It grew on me. I used to not really care for it. It used to kind of be like a skip for me, but I do like this one. I think it's one of the stronger album tracks on Shutdown, which I think has a lot of filler on it. So it's definitely one of the better.
No, I agree. I just want to say one quick thing. We're talking about Phil Spector and lyrics. Was not a great lyric writer. He wasn't. Most of his lyrics were pretty simple. I think River Deep Mountain High is a great example. That song is great because of Tina Turner's vocal and the production. The lyrics are horrible. If I had a rag doll lyrics are terrible. But what makes it great is they are. But what makes it great is the production and the Tina Turner just freaking sings it like the rent is due, you know. And I just want to say one quick thing about ripoff. Okay, this is an homage. This is not a ripoff. A ripoff is like for me when you directly take it and it's like, okay, like the song. Listen for the listeners out there, this is a ripoff. James Brown's Hot, 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 I Need to Be Loved is a ripoff of David Bowie's Fame. It is the same guitar loop. He took the same thing and wrote new lyrics off it and didn't even give anybody credit. That's a ripoff. This was not a ripoff. This is an homage.
Yeah. Justin, anything?
Don't Worry Baby. I heard that song before I ever heard Be My Baby, actually. So I was unaware of that it was a ripoff to begin with, or that anybody thought that. But for many years, and also like Reilly said, I had no idea that was about a car race at all. Like for the first like few years I had heard it, I thought it was just like a love song to a woman kind of thing. And yeah, it's one of their greatest songs. So I'd say even just for that collaboration alone, like Roger Christian, he deserves so many props for that. Like honestly, In the Parking Lot, that's kind of an obscure track that not a lot of people know about. I first heard this song because I didn't actually get Shutdown Volume 2 until like the late 90s, I would say. And I first heard this song on a compilation somewhere. I think it was called Be True to Your School or something from the early 80s. And it was just like a random track on there. I was like, whoa, what is this? Like, I've never heard this before. And it has like the interesting intro and like then it speeds up and everything. It's kind of a cool arrangement for 1964, something that you wouldn't really hear on the radio or like in popular music at the time. So you can kind of see that they're growing with these songs. So yeah.
I really love the part in that song where it's like, he's turning up the radio dial.
Yeah.
That's the moment.
Yeah.
So for most songs, especially when it's a song that's growing on me, there's usually that one part of that song that first clicks, and then the rest will follow. That's what clicked. And I mean, Shutdown Volume 2 has tons of filler on here. I mean, fucking Denny's drums. But
it's a great track.
But I mean, when I was doing the album rankings initially, because I mean, this is a ranking that is subject to change pretty much any time I go back to it. I was kind of thinking like, all right, this will go like maybe like number 20, and then I gave it a re-listen, and this song really hit with me pretty recently. So I really like it. I like I said, like you guys said, the arrangements is very. I don't know if ahead of the time is even the right word. It's just so progressive. It's so like different. Not necessarily like new, it's just different, which is something you didn't really see. So I really enjoy it. But unfortunately, I mean, I think Roger Christian was a great collab with Brian, but after Shutdown Volume 2, they didn't do anything together, which kind of stinks. But I mean, then again, Brian was really moving in a new direction. After Shutdown Volume 2, you have All Summer Long, and then you have Today, Summer Days, and then Pet Sounds. So it really wasn't that far off. You really, especially in Don't Worry Baby, you're really seeing the seeds planted for what was coming up. So I mean, although I think they could have put out some more good music, I think it was kind of good that he let Christian go. But Roger Christian actually helped out Jan and Dean a lot. They did Dead Man's Curve, Little Old Lady from Pasadena, and Drag City. The other ones I don't really care for it too much. I'm not a huge Jan and Dean fan, but those three I think are pretty good tracks. I don't know if you guys listen to Jan and Dean at all.
Yeah, I mean, I know like their hits. I know a few of them, but like, yeah, I wouldn't say I'm like a huge fan of them overall though. Like I like a couple of the hits and that's about it. But, you know, obviously, you know, they have a lot of ties with the Beach Boys because, Brian wrote Surf City for them. And then obviously Jan Dean Torrance went touring with Mike for a bit in the 80s and recording. So obviously there's a lot of connections there. But one thing I wanted to mention real quick, just going back to Don't Worry Baby. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the clip of Brian. He's in some radio studio with the DJs, and they tell him that Ronnie Spector had recorded a version of Don't Worry Baby. And Brian was because obviously Brian loves the Ronettes. He loves Be My Baby. And he's like, really? Like they did? And they're like, yeah, you want to hear it? And then there's a video of him like reacting to it, and he's just like blown away. He's like, oh my God, this is it. So I thought that was really cool. I'm glad that exists. It's fun to see Brian blown away.
Yeah, and I just want to say one quick thing about Roger Christian. Him and Gary Usher produced probably one of the most blatant cash grabs that Capitol ever put out, The Beatles Story. Are you guys familiar with that?
Oh, yeah.
Basically, what it is, in case our listeners aren't familiar with it, it was basically like a documentary double album that Capitol put out of like interviews of the Beatles and little things of like some of their music and stuff, and it's just a blatant cash grab. I think they actually did reissue it in that Beatles CD box set. I don't really know why they did. I guess just for like the novelty factor. But yeah, they produced that, and also not to be confused, Roger Christian actually has the same name as the set director Roger Christian, who won an Oscar for Star Wars and also directed one of the worst movies of all time, Battlefield Earth. So, fun fact.
Oh, the Beatles Story. I freaking hate that. Okay, so there's a record store that's like less than a mile away from my house, maybe like a mile. And I go there a lot, and every time I'm searching through the Beatles section, there's like 50 copies of the Beatles Story, and I have to I'm looking for a copy of Rubber Soul, because that's one of my favorite Beatles albums, probably my favorite. And then I remember every single time I go there, I dig through there, and it's just like Beatles Story, Beatles Story, Beatles Story, Beatles second album, Beatles Story, and it pisses me off so much. Hate it.
You're looking for the American Rubber Soul?
I finally got a copy, but now I'm looking for I want to get an original pressing of the Blue album.
Oh, okay, nice.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Just like freaking Beatles Story everywhere.
Like I said, it was a blatant cash grab. People bought it, realized this sucks, and then took it back to the record store.
Freaking hate that album. Any thoughts on Jen and Dean, Justin? Not really.
I listened to them growing up as a kid, because my dad really liked them, but I don't like their voices that much, to be honest. Like I don't feel that they're not even anywhere near the level of Beach Boys as far as their voices. So
I like Little Old Lady from Pasadena, but I also was introduced to that song from the Beach Boys performing it live. Dead Man's Curve is all right, but besides Surf City, which was also written by Brian, I mean, those two songs, I don't really care for them. I respect them, but I don't really care for their music. But I mean, kind of past that, Roger Christian kind of faded into obscurity, which kind of sucks. He also died, I think, in 1990, which is kind of wild. But yeah, he never reconnected with Brian, at least from what I know, from what I researched. But I kind of want to ask, who do you guys think did a better job, Gary Usher or Roger Christian, with Brian at least?
I mean, to me, the more lasting impact was Gary Usher, just because of like those ballads that he did with Brian were just so obviously like, yeah, Roger Christian was Don't Worry Baby, he co-wrote or helped with the lyrics, so obviously that's a big contribution. But I would say overall Gary Usher. Roger Christian, it seemed like mostly specialized with like doing just the car songs, where like I think Gary Usher, there was more like diversity in the lyrics, so I would say Gary Usher. Also Gary Usher was before Roger Christian as well. So that's what I would say. But both were obviously like very important collaborators, and they both did a lot of good stuff with Brian. So,
yeah. Matt, Justin.
I would say Don't Worry Baby's great. But as a whole, yeah, Gary Usher, because it was earlier, so I think the impact was better. You know, like the impact was more with like Brian getting used to the studio and the songwriting thing. And also, you know, In My Room is great too. And I think as a whole, I do prefer the more introspective lyrics of Gary Usher than I do of like the car stuff of Roger Christian. Then again, though, Car Crazy Cutie is great, and The Parking Lot's great. So I think we should just be happy that both collaborate. It's not, we don't have to choose, you know. It's not like Sophie's Choice, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Justin, any thoughts?
I agree with Jake and Matt that Gary Usher is probably the one that has more lasting impact. I feel like he and Brian were a little bit closer, whereas Roger Christian was more of like a professional kind of relationship. Especially being like a radio DJ and like he played a lot of the Beach Boys music and stuff. It was more of like a professional kind of like, hey, how you're doing. It wasn't like any like Gary Usher he had known like before Beach Boys kind of things. So I feel just for that reason alone, like it has more of a lasting impact, and the songs are a little bit more less surface. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I really agree. I think Gary Usher, I think him and Brian had a great relationship. I mean, Gary literally visited Brian's house. And Murray actually wanted to hit Gary with the 2x4. So I think that the introspective lyrics are like they're very like obviously they're very reflective, and I think Gary really understood Brian on that personal level where Brian was writing this deep music for Lonely Scene in my room, and Gary literally like took the music and gave them the perfect words to the songs. So I totally agree. But like Matt said, we don't really have to choose. It's just kind of more like a talking point, I think. But yeah, Gary Usher really understood Brian, and I think it's kind of adds on to why I think it's sad that Landy wouldn't let Usher and Brian connect again. So yeah.
Right.
I
know this is brief. Are we going to talk about the brief relationship with Russ Titleman, or are we going to just go
Yeah,
straight?
yeah. I was gonna say, before we get to Tony Asher, there were 2 songs that Russ Titleman had, and that's ironically it's 2 outtakes. Sherry, She Needs Me, or as it was known then, Sandy, and Guess I'm Dumb, which Brian wrote for Glenn Campbell. I think those are 2 very good songs. 2 songs I think really should have been put on albums, but I understand that Guess I'm Dumb was a gift from Brian to Glenn for helping out on the Beach Boys touring. And Sandy was unfinished. I like pretty much every version of that song. Daylim's released a version of it today, which I admit I really liked it, but Daylim's has done better AI work. But again, Sandy's a good song. I like the instrumental version, but I also like the released version, or I guess unreleased, from 78 with Brian's older voice over the 65 track. But if you guys want to talk about those songs pretty quick, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think they're both great songs. Again, why they were outtakes, I'll never know. I know Guess I'm Dumb was given to Glenn Campbell, which was a good song, but it was a flop. I don't know how it did on the charts. I know it didn't do much on the charts because the 45 cost a fortune. Let's see how well it did on the charts. Oh, it didn't chart. Okay. Yeah, why it didn't chart is beyond me, but it's a great song. I like the Sherry, She Needs Me, like the one that you mentioned on, I think it's on the Made in California box where they mix it together. I don't like the AI stuff. Hot take. I know I don't like listening to it, so I don't do it.
Yeah, I don't like it, but like I think it's interesting to look at least like once or twice.
I don't even like to even touch it though. To me, it's like I don't want to open that can of worms. But Russ Titleman, very, very successful career. I know he wrote a song for the Hollies called "Yes I Will," which the Monkees later covered on. He wrote that with Jerry Goffing. "I'll Be True to You." It was called "I'll Be True to You" when the Monkees did it. It's on the first Monkees album. He also won 3 Grammys. I know the Grammys ain't much, but Record of the Year for Steve Winwood's "Higher Love," Album of the Year for Eric Clapton's "MTV Unplugged," and Record of the Year for Eric Clapton's "Tears in Heaven." And he also worked for many, many, many years for Warner Brothers Records, worked with a ton of artists: Randy Newman, James Taylor, George Harrison, Ricky Lee Jones, Chaka Khan, Christine McVie. I'm just going on the Wikipedia page here. He worked with Brian on the solo album. So yeah, he's had a very, very successful career, but I guess him and Brian just didn't quite click. Maybe that's why they didn't write so many songs together back in the band's prime.
They're very good songs, though.
They're very good songs.
Jake, any thoughts on Sherry, She Needs Me?
I like both. I wouldn't say I love them, but I like them. Like, I will listen to them. I have them like on my Beach Boys playlist. I think with Sherry, She Needs Me, I like the verses more than I do the chorus. But I do like the song. And then Guess I'm Dumb, I think is obviously like a really good arrangement. I think Glenn Campbell did it really well. These both are good enough to have gotten an official release. It's a shame that they didn't. Obviously, Guess I'm Dumb was recorded by Glenn Campbell and released, but it didn't do anything commercially. So, but it would have been interesting to hear like the Beach Boys do that one, considering like it does sound like kind of like a Pet Sounds-esque track. So I like them. It's not like favorites of mine.
Justin?
Yeah, I really like both these tracks. They should have released Guess I'm Dumb. I don't know why they didn't do that. Sandy, Sherry, same thing on Summer Days. That should have been released. Just hearing those 65 vocals in that version that Matt mentioned on Made in California, it's just unbelievable. Like, and you hear Brian's 1976 vocal on top of it, and it's heartbreaking to hear what his voice had come to by that point. It would have been really interesting to hear the 65 version with his vocal or with Dennis's vocal as originally planned. It's just a shame. It's just a shame. They were both great songs.
Yeah. So this is the big one, and I think we're gonna have a lot to say about it. Tony Asher, who I mean, kind of crazy because for the next couple of albums, it was actually Mike who was Brian's kind of go-to guy for lyrics, and I was thinking about putting Mike on the list, but I feel like that could be a whole episode on itself.
Yeah.
Of Mike.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, let's just fuck him. We'll skip to Tony Asher. But he was born in England, but he grew up in LA, and he actually, unlike some of the other guys, he was a musician first. He played piano. He was really into classical music. And he was actually recording voiceovers for a commercial because he's a jingle writer, and the Beach Boys were next door, and that's kind of how they met. I think I heard a lot of things. I heard that he snuck into the recording studio to meet Brian, but however it happened, they got together. Brian was looking for a clean break from the surf sound, from the old surf image when he was doing Pet Sounds, and this was back when the band was touring without him, so he had plenty of time to work with Tony Asher and write Pet Sounds. They worked on it for 3 weeks, and from what I've read, and I've like checked this plenty of times, this was also the first time really that Brian's collaborator also somewhat helped on the music. He wasn't like contributing as much as Brian, and nowhere near as close, but Brian would check with him. He'd be like, does this sound good as a melody? And he would usually say yes, but there are some sources that say that his biggest contributions, at least music wise, was on Caroline No, I Just Wasn't Made for These Times, and That's Not Me, which I think was actually really wild for me to read about. I didn't expect that. I thought it was strictly Brian doing music and Asher doing lyrics. And that's not to say that Brian didn't do anything, because Brian absolutely wrote like 98% of the music. But I think it's pretty crazy to think that he asked Asher for help on some of that stuff. But Asher's main thing for those was the lyrics. And there's a story of them writing God Only Knows in 45 minutes, which I think is nuts. But lyric-wise, I think he kind of met with him similar way to Gary Usher on that introspective and very reflective level that Brian was going for. I've heard a lot of people mention that Pet Sounds is kind of a concept album in the sense that it's kind of like about teen heartbreak. And while I don't agree that it's really a concept album, I think that is very much an overall theme. And I think Asher really connected with Brian beautifully on this album. So I'm sure I'm going to open up the can of worms. What do you guys think?
I'll be quick. I think what's really special about Pet Sounds and Tony Asher's lyrics is how he was able to get across the emotions in a poignant way, but also in a very simple way. The lyrics are they're not hard to digest. They're very simple, but they're also very poignant. Some beautiful work on there. It's a great album. I think I've spoken enough about Pet Sounds when we did the album ranking. I think Tony Asher was a wonderful collaborator. I know that Tony Asher kind of gives Brian a lot more of the credit. He's like, I was really just the interpreter. I didn't really do much of the lyric writing. So I think he could give himself a little bit more credit than that. Some great lyrics there. God Only Knows especially. I think they wrote that in like 45 minutes. Jesus, 45 minutes for that. 45 minutes is enough to make Paul McCartney jealous. I think that says it all. But that's all I'm going to say. I just think Pet Sounds is wonderful. And I think that a lot of it is due to Tony Asher's wonderful lyrics. I don't really care for his original lyrics to Good Vibrations, though. I think Mike did a better job on those. I will say that.
We'll get to that later, actually.
Lyrically, if we're talking about like collaborators with lyrics, he's definitely my favorite, Tony Asher. I think his work on Pet Sounds is just fantastic. I love the words to those songs. I think he did a great job with them. They're so moving. You basically said it perfectly, Matt. Just really effective. They're not like they're simple, but they work really well. And you can really connect with them. And I think the lyrics of those songs, like Pet Sounds, obviously, like it's a great album, and I love the album as a whole. But there are some songs on it that like aren't like particular favorites of mine. But I think they work for me anyway because of the lyrics. Like you can connect with them; they're very relatable. And like you said, like it's kind of like a concept album. It's got this theme throughout it of like teenage love and heartbreak and just like loss of innocence, and it's just like it works as a whole unit. And I really love it. I guess some of my favorite lyrics that Tony Asher helped contribute, God Only Knows, obviously, that's probably like, one of the greatest set of lyrics ever in any song, let alone just like the Beach Boys songs. I would say Caroline No, just like such heartbreaking lyrics. Really moving song. That's one where like, yeah, like the song itself is like a beautiful and sad, like in the arrangement and the chord changes and everything, but then the lyrics just add another level of depth to it. Obviously, like Wouldn't It Be Nice is amazing. Great lyrics to that too. Don't Talk, Put Your Head on My Shoulder is one of my favorite songs on Pet Sounds. And I think that has a great set of lyrics to it. Again, simple but effective. Like I can hear so much in your size. Just like it works so well. And I love the song a lot. And personally, like if you ask me, I know like we're going to get to Van Dyke Parks in a little bit, but like if you ask me to choose between Tony Asher's lyrics and Van Dyke Parks, I'm taking Tony Asher any day. Because I connect with his lyrics. I think Tony Asher's lyrics are relatable and genuine and heartfelt, and I really feel them like on an emotional level for me. Whereas with like Van Dyke Parks, I respect his wordplay and like his ability to like make like, a lot of these like rhymes and stuff work, but like I don't really connect with those lyrics. To me, they're more like poetry, which is fine, but like they don't do too much for me personally. But that's just my opinion. I think that's honestly why I connect with Pet Sounds more than Smile in general. Yeah, that's my opinion. I think Tony Asher was great. I think he made some great contributions, and I also love his contributions that well, maybe we can talk about this a little in a bit, but his work he did with Brian in the 90s. He got back together with Brian and they did a couple songs together, and I think it's Everything I Need they did, and it's a song that Brian and he wrote with, I think, Hal Blaine plays drums on it, and it was never officially released as like a Brian Wilson song. It was released on an album by the Wilson sisters, by his daughters. But the original demo version is really nice, and I wish they'd given that an official release. I think it's a great song. So that's all I have to say.
Justin.
Like Jake had said, like the depth of the subjects covered here, and like I know they had like lots and lots of talks while they were kind of making this album, and like about different things in life and just different feelings and different like scenarios. And I think that Asher really got Brian, and he was able to kind of translate Brian's thoughts really well to kind of a way that like everybody would kind of relate and understand, kind of thing. And I think that's a big part of this album kind of lasting all this time is due to those lyrics and due to the music as well too. But yeah, I think that same thing with Jake. Like if you had to choose between Van Dyke Parks and Tony Asher, for me it's definitely Tony Asher, just because his lyrics are just more relatable to me, like on a personal level.
Oh yeah, for sure. I was gonna say that. I mean, I like a lot of Van Dyke's lyrics, and I like a lot of what Van Dyke tried to do, but I think Tony Asher, just like we've been saying, these lyrics are generational in the sense that like this isn't going to be something that, unlike a lot of the previous songs, like the Cars songs and the Summer songs, these are lyrics that anybody could really understand in any generation. It's human emotion, and it's something that we all get. So that very deep lyrics, but yet also very simple. And I'm going Tony Asher over Van Dyke by a mile. By like 5 miles. It's not even close. I like I said, I love a lot of what Van Dyke did, but I mean, I love Pet Sounds. I know I ranked it 3rd on my album ranking list, but if I'm going to be honest, on my like top 20 albums, it's like number like 13, 14. It's there. I love it that much. It's incredible, and a lot of it is the lyrics. A lot of it's production too, but a lot of it is the lyrics, and I got to give Asher a lot of credit there. So yeah, that's Pet Sounds. I was kind of surprised that we got through that in only like 10 minutes. I really thought we would have went on for like 2 hours, but yeah. So he kind of kept working with Asher, but he didn't really like his lyrics with good vibrations, and so he cut him. Kind of shocked. I mean, I know he kind of maybe bluffed up some of the lyrics on that song, but he cut him pretty quickly. But I got to be honest, I didn't know they got together in the 90s. I was doing a lot of research on these guys, and that's just one topic I'm surprised.
Yeah, it was a brief thing, where they just reunited. It was him and Brian Wilson and Tony Asher, and then Hal Blaine also plays drums on those tracks as well. So it was kind of like a Pet Sounds reunion in a way, which is kind of cool. And I believe that might have been like the last songs that Hal Blaine played on with Brian as well. But you should check that out for sure. It's called Everything I Need, and it's got Brian, it's got Carney, and it's got Wendy Wilson on it. And it's a really nice song, even though it's just a demo version and the quality of it isn't great. It's really nice. And I think I read something where like they were originally going to release it like that. I think Hal Blaine said it was like such a great track. And of course, I think it was, oh God, what's the guy's name?
Thomas.
Joe Thomas.
Yeah.
Of course. Said he was like, no, this isn't any good. And I think at that point, I think I read like Brian would kind of just go with whatever he said, and he was like, yeah, he's right. So then they ended up changing it, and the version that got an official release is nowhere near the song that it was on that demo. So, but I definitely recommend
overdubs, like all over the place. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
One other thing I wanted to mention with Asher, there are some funny quotes that I've read about like his experience working with Brian. There's a quote from like after the fact, so this was like years later, I think, but he said about his experience working with Brian. He said that Brian exhibited this awful taste. His choice of movies was invariably terrible. Every 4 hours we'd spend writing songs, there'd be about 48 hours of these dopey conversations about some dumb book he just read, or else he'd just go on and on about girls. And then this is the one I laugh at the most. He said that his impression of Wilson was of the single most irresponsible person he had ever met, recalling that he had seen uncashed royalty checks up to $100,000 laying around Wilson's house. He was further bemused by what he described as the weird relationship he maintained with Marilyn, like something out of the Flintstones. Personally, I could never understand why he married her, which, if you're a Beach Boys fan and you know a bit about the history, you know that was a very odd relationship. Obviously, he had the thing going with Diane, too, where he really liked her as well. I think Tony mentioned that as well. He was like, they would have like these conversations where Brian would like talk about like I don't know which one I love more. I don't know if I like Marilyn more. Like, did I marry the right one? And it's like, that's just crazy. That tells you how much of a connection they had though when they were writing. That like Brian was just like sharing such personal information with them. So obviously there was a deep connection there.
Oh yeah, I mean, Brian said he's going to call "Smile" his Teenage Symphony to God. I actually think this is the Teenage Symphony to God, in my opinion. And I do think they had a really good connection though. It was a weird one, but like you can really think about it, they were together pretty much all day, every day for like a month. And even if you like, maybe it's because I worked at a summer camp and I like know like if you're with some people for like even like 2 weeks, you really develop a connection with them. Like these guys were like smoking like pounds of pot and like writing songs nonstop. And I am not surprised that Asher knows Brian's taste in movies and women. But yeah, we kind of mentioned it. Good Vibrations, the lyrics Wilson didn't like, so he got Van Dyke Parks. And this is going to be a weird one because I know a lot about Van Dyke. I think I did the most research on him because he has such a weird career and he is such a weird person. So let's just jump right into it. He began his career as a child actor, of all things, and yeah. He graduated high school and went to Carnegie Tech for music. He did a lot on guitar, but after a while, it just became boring. So he dropped out and moved to LA and started a band with his brother Carson Parks as the Steeltown 2. And that's where he met David Crosby. Yet again, David Crosby being mentioned. That's not going to be the last time we talk about him. But yeah, I mean, as he kind of got more immersed in the music scene, he became more of a songwriter. Actually, a really fun fact is when his older brother Benjamin Parks died, kind of to like pay back or pay respects, Terry Gilkinson or whatever the frick his name is, had Van Dyke arrange the song "Bare Necessities" for Disney, which blew my mind. I'm like, holy shit! But that still, I kind of see it though. Definitely like a Van Dyke thing. You see that later on with some of his other music. But as he grew as a songwriter, he became very well known for his wordplay. There's a couple of songs I think that are worth mentioning. "Come On Sunshine" and "High Coin." I personally think they're meh, but the lyrics are like we talked about, lots of wordplay, and Van Dyke had a really weird and very good way with words. But I mean, as he kind of went on, he became an in-demand session musician for his piano skills. People asked him to arrange songs, and people asked him to write songs. He even was a stage performer. I think is pretty cool. There's a story of him actually joining Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention on stage. And then after a little bit, he's like, I don't want this because I don't like the people yelling in the audience. So that kind of shows you the kind of person he was. I'm not hating on him. I think he's a very cool guy. I just think he's a very, like, also he's like a freaking oddball. And part of that is because he hates the Beatles. Like, this guy is the number one hater on the Beatles. I gotta pull up the quote.
Even worse than Scarufi or whatever that guy's name is.
Oh my god! I'll just read it. It seemed to me that they would be fine in fighting spirit to take on the challenge of wrestling that trophy out of the hands of those interlopers. And he's referring to Pet Sounds. So he is the Beatles' number one hater. I think it's very funny because there's a couple of other quotes out there. I watched like a quick interview from like I think the mid '70s of him absolutely shitting on the Beatles for whatever reason. But again, very Van Dyke thing to do. I mean, he's like somehow like the biggest American, I think, without being like the biggest American, if you know what I mean. Like, look at Song Cycle, and he's trying to be like the most Americana guy. We'll get to that in a bit, but freaking crazy dude. I love him, and I think at the same time, I think he's the biggest like oddball I've ever read about. But yeah, biggest hater of the Beatles. Anyways, besides working with Brian, because we'll get to Smile in a second, he worked with Harry Nilsson, Randy Newman, The Byrds, Frank Zappa, and Stephen Stills. And I guess I get that out of the way. He wrote a couple of songs and helped out with David Crosby. He played organ on The Byrds album Fifth Dimension, specifically on 5D. And because of that, David Crosby asked him to join the Byrds, and he refused. Later on, David Crosby asked him to join Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, and he refused, which I think is kind of crazy because I don't know what he would have brought to the band. I think he would have fit in pretty well, but I don't know what he would have brought because if you've ever listened to Song Cycle and you listen to a song like Vine Street and then you listen to Our House by Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, two wildly different things. But
Totally different, yeah.
who knows? I think he would have been pretty cool. But anyways, he collabed with the Beach Boys eventually. And ironically, he wasn't a big fan of them at first. There's a quote where he says, I knew they didn't surf. But he was a big fan of the Four Freshmen. I could just hear him saying that. Like, he has such a distinct voice. I that's something he would definitely say. So like, I knew they didn't surf. And then you like start saying like crazy wordplay or something. But once Pet Sounds released, he was like, all right, I kind of get these guys. And I think he kind of saw Brian moving away from that surf sound and that summer sound they had. So I really appreciate that. But that's where you get that quote. It seemed to me that they would be fine in fighting spirit to take on this challenge of wrestling the trophy away from those interlopers, referring to the Beatles. So there's different accounts of how they met. There's one that says they may have met through David Crosby, but it was probably through most sources at a party with Terry Melcher. But Brian sought out Van Dyke because he seemed enlightened, and you have to keep in mind Brian's mental state at the time was kind of starting to go on that decline, and he kind of saw like he was doing a lot of drugs, unfortunately. So he sought out Van Dyke, who was enlightened, and that's kind of how they got together. Van Dyke did not help out on Good Vibrations lyrics, though. He said there's nothing he can really improve on, so that's where you get Mike Love's collaboration on that. However, Brian kind of kept with him and asked him to help out on Smile, and most of the lyrics of the songs that are finished on Smile, or at least the Beach Boys version of Smile, are by Van Dyke. Surf's Up, Heroes and Villains, Wonderful, Wind Chimes, Cabin Essence. So let's hear our thoughts on those songs in general, and especially the Van Dyke contributions.
Well, I'll just say Van Dyke's an interesting character. He also auditioned for the Monkees, I think, which is cool.
Really?
Yeah, really. A lot of people auditioned for the Monkees. Lots of people. Harry Nilsson and Stephen Stills. Stephen Stills was friends with him. But anyway, going back to the Van Dyke stuff. I think some of those songs are great. The thing about Van Dyke Parks, I know we kind of talked about this earlier, is the lyrics are very, as I've said it before numerous times, word salad. They're very word salad. They're very oblique. They're very like kind of, they go around in circles, a lot of wordplay and stuff. And I think it works best in doses, and it's certainly a bit of an acquired taste. I don't know if I really like Beach Boys songs to be like that. Like, I like artists that do lyrics like that. Like, I'm a big David Bowie fan, and he has lyrics like that. I like Nirvana, and Kurt Cobain did lyrics like that. But I don't really know if it kind of fit the Beach Boys style, to be honest with you. I like a lot of those songs. Like, I like Wonderful. I like Wind Chimes. I like Surf's Up. I mean, I love Surf's Up. But I just don't know if it really quite fit the Beach Boys that well, if that makes sense. I like the stuff. I just don't know. I don't know. I don't know if it was really... I know Mike didn't like it very much. Cabanescence, I know he had a big issue with Cabanescence. Was over and over the crow cries, uncover the cornfield. He hated that lyric. I like the stuff, but I think it was best as maybe like in doses. I don't know if it should have been like, I think Smile was going too much. I think it was kind of going down this rabbit hole that I think obviously that's why it ended up getting canned. And yeah, so that's kind of how I feel about it, if that makes sense. I know I kind of have a lot of thoughts about it, a little bit of rambly.
Oh yeah. Jake.
Yeah, I kind of what you said, Matt, like his lyrics are an acquired taste for sure. I think some of them work really well. I think like Surf's Up is probably his greatest set of lyrics. Again, I still don't know what the hell they're talking about, but like it works well for sure. And I feel like it creates, like I've said this before, it creates like a mood. Like the words create this feeling that really enhances the song. But yeah, I kind of what you were saying, Matt. It's definitely only works in doses, I feel like, and I do kind of get Mike's. Like I know what people like to portray Mike as like the big villain of the Beach Boys, but like I don't know. I kind of get where he was coming from, like especially when you consider like it really. I know like Pet Sounds had come out, like just before this, which had like more deep introspective lyrics. But like you have to remember, like it really wasn't that long ago that the Beach Boys were still just doing songs about girls and surfing and cars. And, at least with Pet Sounds, those lyrics, people could relate to them. I know Pet Sounds, didn't sell quite as well as some of their previous albums, but you could say like people could relate to them on like an emotional level, where like with Smile, I really think it was like those lyrics are kind of out there. And I kind of see Mike's issue with them that like, only a couple years before they're doing lyrics about love and romance and girls. And now we're doing like this really kind of out there wordplay, word salad type lyrics where like, half the stuff you don't even know what they're talking about. So, yeah, I mean, Van Dyke's an interesting character. Obviously, he played a big role in the Beach Boys around this time with the lyrics on "Smile," obviously, which is a beloved album. But yeah, I don't have too much else to say about him. I think my favorite Van Dyke Parks fact is the fact that he plays accordion on Kokomo. I think that's just hilarious. That like this dude that's deeply involved in Smile and like all this like complex music is also on freaking Kokomo. I just think that's the funniest thing. But yeah.
Did he also play something on Summer in Paradise too?
Yeah.
Lahira Aloha, he plays accordion. Yeah.
Mike apparently still asked him what the hell Cabanescence means. Still, almost 30 years later, Mike still can't get out of his head. Yeah, that's funny.
He didn't like Columnated Ruins Domino either. I think he was like perplexed by that one too. And that was one where like Mike was like grilling him on it, and he's like, I don't know what it means either. And Mike's like, what do you mean you don't know what it means? Like, explain it. And then that's when like Van Dyke started realizing like he's like, there's a lot of tension being caused by me like being involved with this, and I don't want to create tension within this band. So that's kind of like that's part of the reason the project completely fell apart. But yeah, I don't have too much else more to say about Van Dyke.
Was he trying to do like cut up lyrics, or was he just like trying to just do wordplay?
Yes.
Like, both.
Yeah.
Justin. You guys know what cut up lyrics are, right? We take the thing and you cut and you you rearrange it. Sounds like it to me.
It's random, yeah. I can see why Brian would be attracted to Van Dyke, especially in the 1966, 1967 LA, kind of the drug scene, all these parties he's going to. Like he'd met Danny Hutton at that point as well too, from Three Dog Night. He was hanging out with like some of the Turtles. I know Mark Volman and Flo and Eddie, they're called. Yeah, so just like he had like this group of people around him that were like really into drugs and like really into partying, and you meet all these sort of weird characters, but they're kind of intriguing too, Like I can understand why Brian would be kind of attracted to that type of a person to kind of like, oh, maybe we can make something different with this person. Maybe we can make some sort of new sound or new art or new direction we could go into. That really excited him at that point. So I can see why he would choose Van Dyke for that. But I think, like the other guys said, like for a whole album, that's a little bit too much. I think if Van Dyke contributed some of the lyrics and then Mike contributed some of the lyrics, or Tony Asher contributed some of the lyrics, like it would have been a better thing, like in order to relate to like the typical person. And I think that's part of the reason why Smile was kind of shelved too, because like you have all these like weird lyrics, you have these weird backing tracks. And I remember reading an article, I can't remember where it was from, with Brian mentioning that some of the songs were like so hard to sing over with the lyrics, like it wouldn't fit, kind of thing. And that's part of the reason why he kind of just grew frustrated with it and shelved it. So I think if they would have had a little bit more simple lyrics for a lot of the songs, it would have been a little bit better. That's my opinion, though.
Yeah, I gotta admit, I do like a lot of his lyrics. I mean, they definitely roll off the tongue pretty good. I think they're very articulate. I like a lot of the alliteration, and I like a lot of the wordplay. I think it just, for Smile, it definitely kind of led to its collapse in some way. Although I got to give Van Dyke credit. He saw that the band was starting to kind of like infight a bit, and he knew that he should leave. And I think that ultimately, though, it did lead to the collapse of Smile, because Brian didn't really have somebody to rely on for the lyrics, and kind of everything kind of went downhill from there. Yeah, I mean, there's like a billion things going on at once with that project, and it ahead of its time, but also just too much going on, and it led to the collapse. So after that, after he left, surprisingly, it wasn't really Brian leaving the Collaborator. It was Van Dyke's leaving Brian, which is kind of new for him. So after a while, Van Dyke eventually kind of made his own solo album, Song Cycle, and I listened to it for maybe the 5th time today, trying to finally have it click with me in some way. Hopefully it would click, and it didn't. I think it's Van Dyke trying to be too sophisticated, but at the same time also too much of a hippie at once, and it doesn't click for like period. There are parts of it that I like, but the way that he structured the album was so fucking weird. Because instead of it being like song by song, even though the songs are labeled, it's really just like 45 seconds for one song, and then you transition to the next. But each song is so damn weird. Like there's nothing melodically going on there for me. I don't know. Have you guys ever listened to it? Like,
yeah. I listened to it a long, long time ago, and that's pretty much what I remember. Like, not a lot of melodic stuff going on, and that's my issue with it. I have a hard time connecting. I mean, I'm not going to say it's for every song, but I mean, a lot of songs and albums that I love have some melody to them, some melodic things going on. And yeah, I just remember it was a lot of wordplay, and I'm not a huge fan of his voice, and it's just not a favorite album of mine by any means. I think it's a tough album to get through all the way, honestly. I don't really plan on, I mean, I guess I'll probably listen to it again sometime soon, since we are talking about it, just to see if it's grown on me a little. But from what I remember, there was nothing about it that I really particularly enjoyed. So
I've never listened to it, but based on what you guys say, and based on me reading the Wikipedia article where it says he spent $35,000 on this thing in 1967 money, which was over 3.5 times the budget. It sounds like he was just spending money trying to make it sound weird. That's what it sounds like to me. Spending too much money just trying to make it sound different, and not enough time spent on like trying to make it melodic. Which is interesting. Kind of sounds like Prince's first album, actually.
Justin, any thoughts on Song Cycle?
I've never heard it, but like I mentioned, like it was the hippie kind of culture back then. Like I can understand why we don't really understand it today, but maybe at that time it made sense to do that. I'm not sure, because I wasn't around at that time, but there's a lot of really weird albums from that period, from like 1966, 67, even into 68. There's a lot of like weird psychedelic albums.
I told Jake this. I think it's the most Van Dyke Parks thing you could ever listen to. Like, everything is Van Dyke. Like, think of his lyrics and then make those lyrics transform somehow into music. And that's what it is. is Van Dyke's lyrics as music with Van Dyke lyrics. So
Yeah, I
I
think
will.
you.
Yeah,
No, I think didn't you say when you told me that you said it's like Van Dyke's "Love You," which I thought was funny.
yeah, it is Van Dyke's
There you
love.
go.
I will say I'm shitting. I think we're all a little bit, but me specifically are like shitting on Van Dyke. I think he's still a pretty cool guy.
Yeah.
I definitely I like a lot of where his mind is, except for the Beatles comment. But I do appreciate that, and he actually later on in the 70s he did have a pretty decent album called Discover America that I like. It's one of those meh albums. There's a couple of good tracks on there, but other than that, I mean, I don't come back to it too much. But acapella is pretty good. I think I sent that to Jake. Whereas deals with a lot of like Caribbean and calypso music, and it's actually a lot of. To be fair, it's because Van Dyke's not writing the melodies to these songs. He's adapting a lot of songs from calypso music and Caribbean music and arranging them and kind of adding his own like spots here and there. And he wasn't selfish. He didn't take any credit for any of the songwriting, so I gotta give him credit there. Pretty good album. I don't know if you guys have listened to it. It's called Discover America. I definitely recommend listening to it at least once. It's pretty damn good in some spots. So, there is a story of Van Dyke in the 70s with Brian writing Holland. He did contribute to A Day in the Life of the Tree. I think we talked about that a little bit in the last episode. But there's a funny story when Holland was coming out and they needed a lead-off single because they didn't have one. It was kind of already like... And Brian needed to write the single. And so he started working on Sail on Sailor. And Van Dyke's with him. I kind of forget the reason why, but the story goes as Van Dyke's working with him and Brian's like, hypnotize me and tell me I'm not crazy. And then Van Dyke is like, write the fucking song. Which has always stuck with me. That's one of those things. And I love Holland, so I do like Van Dyke, and I really like Jack Reilly, and I like Sail on Sailor. I think it's a pretty damn good song. I don't know how much Van Dyke actually contributed to it, though. There's like 5 songwriters on that, so I don't know really where it was. So Sail on Sailor, good song.
From what he said, I think Van Dyke has said he contributed a decent amount. Like it sounds like either, I forget if he said it was like the verses or the chorus. I forget which part, but he definitely made it sound like he contributed a decent bit. But like you said, there are a lot of collaborators on that song. It's like 4 or 5 different guys, so a lot of people involved besides just Brian. So
there's Tandon Almer. He didn't do anything at all on that song, but his name is on there because he scored drugs for Brian.
Oh yeah,
Brian put his name on there for that.
That's hilarious.
And I think Ray Kennedy and Jack Reilly wrote the lyrics. Jack Reilly wrote a couple lines, and Ray Kennedy wrote a lot of the lyrics.
So Brian basically did what Bob Marley did for No Woman, No Cry. He just gave him the credit just because.
Yeah.
I mean, Bob Marley did like the soup kitchen, but like this, he just gave it to him because he got him drugs. Interesting.
Yeah. One thing I will say though about Van Dyke is in the 70s, that he did that was really good was he was a cheerleader for the band, and he really kind of helped them when they were kind of struggling, and he had ties at Warner Brothers that really because he was working for them at that point too. He was audiovisual A&R at that point, so he had like really good connections with Mo Austin and some of the other guys that were there, and kind of really helped them. And I think Warner Brothers didn't treat them as brutally as they would have without Van Dyke Parks there. So that's my opinion.
Looking at Sail on Sailor, I mean, I can kind of see where Van Dyke contributed. I mean, I could totally be wrong, but I rest the waters, like as in like wrestling the waters, WREST. Fight Neptune's waters. I mean, that sounds like something Van Dyke would write with the kind of that word salad kind of vibe. So yeah, I mean, he definitely contributed to the song, but he seems to be like a very open-minded guy. I mean, I know you don't care for AI, Matt, but Van Dyke actually supported Day Limbs for his version of Smile. I mean, I didn't listen to it. I don't really want to listen to a full album of AI. I mean, I like dabbling here and there with some of it, but Van Dyke gave words of encouragement, so he seems like a very open-minded guy, and I gotta give him credit for that. He had a little bit of a comeback in the 80s. I mean, not really a huge one. With Jump, it's basically like, you know, like those like early 60s, 70s Disney movies soundtracks. That's kind of what it sounds like. It's pretty decent. I don't think it's terrible, but not one I'd give a listen. It's not on streaming, so I had to like really search for it, but not bad. But I really want to talk about Orange Crate Art. I enjoyed that album a lot. It's in the 90s. Parks and Brian got together. Parks said it was because, I mean, with the Smile project collapsing and their collaboration kind of went down in history as a failure, and you want to kind of like get back at it. I enjoy parts of it. I kind of the same with Discover America. It's just a decent album. Tracks I like, tracks I don't really care for. I don't think there's anything like truly bad on it. I definitely like the vibe he was going for. Parks really likes to dabble in that Americana and like American historical vibe, which I really gel with. The title track is pretty good. That's a good one. But have you guys ever listened to Orange Crate Art?
It's been a long time. I think I have, but it's been a really long time, so I can't really comment too much on it. I just remember when I listened to it, nothing really stick with me. So, but I'll have to give it another listen. I don't want to like say anything bad about it in case I listen to it and then I'm like, oh shit, I kind of like this. But from what I remember, I nothing really stuck with me. So, Van Dyke wrote most of the material on there, right?
So Van Dyke wrote all the material on it. Brian just sang.
Okay, got it. Well, you see that that's like a red flag for me. I don't know.
Oh, after, like, it's not like Song Cycle. Don't worry. It's not like Song Cycle.
All right, I'll give it a listen soon.
Actually, fairly good.
I'll have to give it a listen too. But I will say one quick thing about go back to the AI real quick. I'm okay with it if somebody approves of it. I just don't like it when it's like people are doing it and then like if the person doesn't give approval. That's just what I find kind of funky. I don't know. It is what it is.
Yeah, the Smile thing, basically what he did, I haven't listened to the whole thing either, but he basically like kind of filled in the blanks for like parts of the songs that weren't complete. I think the more like part I think some people kind of have an issue with what he did from what I've read is he kind of just like completely altered some songs like from their original form. Like I think he like changed the ending of Surf's Up from what I remember, and I think I heard that and I didn't really like it. Yeah, I'm kind of with you, Matt. Like if somebody approves of it, for sure, I don't have an issue with it. And I don't really have a huge issue with it in general. I kind of just view it as like a curiosity thing where like you put it on just to hear, like, let's see what this could have sounded like. In like an alternate dimension where like this had been recorded by, you know, like there was one recently where they took a song that Dennis never laid a vocal down for and they put a Dennis 70s vocal over it. And obviously, you know, it's not actually Dennis singing it. It's just AI. But like, it's kind of cool to hear like this is what this could have sounded like. So I don't really have a huge issue with AI. It's just I can see why some people do, though. It's definitely kind of a gray area for sure.
Some of it also sounds really bad, too. Some of it is horrible. It sounds like
when it's not done well, it's really rough. And that's where I can see it being disrespectful. But when it's done really well by people that actually genuinely support the art and like the music, I think it can be pretty cool. But
Jake, you and I have the same exact thoughts on AI.
Yeah.
Justin, did you listen to Orange Crate Art?
Yeah, when it first came out. I remember at the time, I think it was 95. Is that when the year it came out? 95. At the time, it was like seen as like this big comeback for Brian, and I think he did a special around this point too. Was it around this point? I can't remember, but yeah, I a couple of times in 95 I heard it, and then that was it. I haven't heard it since then. It didn't really stick with me, like Jake said. Yeah.
Oh, I kind of expected a little bit more, but yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, I mean you're like, oh, I was there when it came out. It's okay.
Yeah, well, it was seen as kind of like a comeback for Brian because he hadn't really put anything out for quite a while. So it was kind of cool to see his name again, and like when you browsing through the CDs and the CD rack and the music store, it's kind of cool to see his name again and to see Van Dyke beside his name. But yeah, I listened to it a couple times. I didn't really connect with it, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, I think I'm hyping it up too much. It's not. It's like maybe like a 2.5 out of 5-star album, but it's got parts of it I like. It's nothing like crazy special. It was very much overhyped, and I kind of feel like that kind of led to like it being not perceived as well. There is a funny story though where Brian's like, Van Dyke, why am I here? And then Van Dyke's like, because I can't stand the sound of my own voice. And Brian's like, that makes sense. All right, take one. And I thought that was pretty funny. That's a very Brian moment.
Right, yeah.
So I do that. Want to give that a shout out. And next couple of years, nothing much happened. And then Brian's like, all right, I'm gonna finish Smile, and I think that was kind of huge because initially he was working with Darian, who I love Darian, at least like especially his like relationship with Brian. Right. And then they couldn't read one of the lyrics on the lyric sheets, so they called Van Dyke, and they faxed it over, and Van Dyke's like, it's this. And then eventually they're like, they gave a call to Van Dyke, and Van Dyke agreed to come back as a full lyricist, which is awesome. Like I said before, like I like Smile. I think it's very cool. It's probably like in my top 15, maybe like I think it's like number 11. I think I said. But I don't think it's like, I think it's a little overhyped. I don't want to say overrated. It's definitely a little overhyped. But for Brian, I think it's huge that he was able to finish that, and Van Dyke was a huge part on that. There's a story. It's not really much of a story. It's just an actual event. Van Dyke came on for the initial concert for Smile. He came on stage for the standing ovation, which was 10 minutes, and he was crying. So I think that kind of shows how like it affected Smile. Definitely affected Brian, but it definitely also affected Van Dyke in some way where he didn't finish it. So I think that's huge. Do you guys have any like quick thoughts on Brian Wilson Presents Smile?
I kind of like it because it's like actually finished, and it's kind of interesting to hear Brian's later voice on it. Kind of hear it, and like it's a bit more fleshed out. Like I also like, was it like I Want to Be Around? No, that wasn't on like the Beach Boys version, and then On a Holiday, I don't think that was on the Beach Boys version either, right? No, I don't think it was. Like at least not with the lyrics. So I kind of like it. It's nice to hear it fleshed out, and I know that basically became the backbone of what the Smile Sessions became. They based it off of Brian Wilson Presents Smile because obviously Smile was never finished. And that's kind of interesting. They gave a 10-minute standing ovation. That's like the stuff they do at Cannes. I don't know how you can clap for 10 minutes, but sure.
Jake?
Yeah, I don't have too many comments on it because it's another album I haven't listened to in a while. The Brian Wilson Presents Smile. It's like you said, man. It's cool that they did finish it. And Brian had this has been such a revered album for years. It was like the most famous unreleased album. So the fact that he was able to actually like get together and finish it was cool. I've heard people say that their issue with it is the fact that like it's Brian's older voice on it and it's lacking like the original Beach Boys harmonies on that. And from what I remember, I do kind of remember thinking that too. Like, I do prefer like a lot of the Smile Sessions versions of these songs for sure. Which I think that's like a fair point. I feel like it's cool hearing Brian like sing the songs like in his older age, but I do prefer the songs with their younger voices. Yeah, I mean, I've kind of said this before, like Smile as a whole isn't my favorite album. Like I think I understand the appreciation for it. But like I'm definitely like I've said this before, between like Pet Sounds and Smile, I'm definitely Pet Sounds all the way. So but Smile obviously has some great highlights on it, some amazing songs, some of the best songs the guys ever did, and it's cool that Brian was able to finish it. So
Justin?
I think for me, it's more the fact that this album was actually finished than it is the results that we got with this album. I think Brian's seeing it finished or like getting through that process of finishing the album did more for him than anything else at the time. And having Van Dyke also be a part of it as well too, kind of like helping him along, really helped. Not really a huge fan of this specific version of it. I actually like the Beach Boys harmonies, like Jake had mentioned. These guys do great job. Darian and the guys, like they do a great job. They sang the correct parts and everything, but it's just the magic isn't there compared to with the Wilson brothers and Mike Love and Al Jardine. Like it's the blend of their voices together. That's what makes them the Beach Boys. That's why when you hear like a karaoke or not karaoke, like a tribute band, and it'll never sound exactly the same as the real band. Never. It's the blend of their voices together. That's the Beach Boys.
Yeah, it's this. It would be like I feel like you could say that for a lot of their albums. Like if they did like a recreation of Pet Sounds years later, it would be the same thing. Like it needs those Beach Boys harmonies on it for it to really have that magic. Like you said, like that's really like what makes their songs so like unique and special is like beyond the songwriting itself. It's the harmonies. It's the vocal blend. And without that, it definitely lacks something. So. But yeah, like I said though, and like you said, it's cool he was able to finish it. I'm glad that he can kind of check that box and be satisfied with that, because obviously it had been a project that he was really committed to doing, and then it just didn't work out at the time. So yeah.
Yeah, I totally prefer Smile sessions. Like, even I like instrumentals, and I honestly think some of them work better as instrumentals anyways. Yeah, I think the last time I actually listened to Brian Wilson's Present Smile before I re-listened to it was 2 years ago. Like,
badly mastered too on the CD. It's really loud in my opinion. Whereas like I feel like the Smile session sounds better, at least in the digital stuff. I don't have either on vinyl. I'm not spending $150 on them on vinyl, but I just find that Brian was
how much it is?
Yeah, because I think they're both out of print. Brian was Present Smile. I just find it kind of sounds kind of harsh on digital to me. At least it's a little overly loud.
Yeah, crap, man, I forgot what I was gonna say. I do want to get the Smile Sessions box set. I'm gonna have to like scour either Discogs or eBay for that, just for the poster alone. But it looks really freaking cool. Like, it has a freaking light up box. It's cool.
We're gonna talk a little bit about That Lucky Old Son. I know Brand Dyke's helped with some of the spoken word, which
he did.
The interludes,
yeah.
Another album, man. It's all right. I don't think it's crazy.
I love that album. I think it's an awesome album. The unfortunate thing is the presence of Scott Bennett, but I think the album itself is wonderful. It's got some great tunes on it. I want to get it on vinyl. I love it. I think it's a great record.
I gotta listen to it again. I didn't listen to it from the video.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this to one of you. I think you, Reilly. I told you, but like, I've never been like, I wouldn't say like Brian has a solo album that like I really love all the way through, where I'm like, oh, this is like a perfect album. I don't think he has one for me, but that album to me is his best latter day record. I think there's some really good songs on it. Midnight's Another Day is like a beautiful ballad. I absolutely love that one. I love the lyrics on it. I love just the overall sound of it. Like, it's one of those songs that shows like, Brian, like he's still got that genius, that songwriting in him. He can still write a song that freaking good at that age. And that was kind of like how I viewed some of the songs on That's Why God Made the Radio too. It's like the fact that like, he was over 70 years old when he wrote those songs is incredible. There were a couple I'm trying to remember. It's been a long time since I've listened to that album. I'm trying to think what other songs I liked. I think Forever She'll Be My Surfer Girl I kind of liked. There's one other one too towards the end. I forgot what it's called, but I like that one too. I think it's called Southern California. I like that one too. Those are the yeah.
I love Good Kind of Love too. I really like that one.
Yeah.
I like Mexican Girl too. It's like Light Up My Sun. I really like the whole record. I think the whole record is very breezy, very fun. I think it's got like a nice theme to it to an extent. I just said, unfortunately, the presence of Scott Bennett kind of soured it a little bit, but if I can listen to Layla and it has a murder on it, I can listen to this.
Weird album cover, by the way. I don't like the album cover very much. I think it could have been a much better cover than what it is.
Yeah, it's not the greatest, but I like the music, so I don't care what cover it's wrapped in.
That's fair. I feel like there's a lot of Beach Boys album covers that they're like very hit or miss. I like a lot of them, but I also like don't like a lot of them. But like the Poop Brown on Today, I mean, I hated it at first, but then as like today's my favorite album. So I mean, like, band. So I kind of warmed up to it, but still doesn't look good.
It's very, very 60s.
It's very 1965.
Yeah.
I'm surprised they didn't call it Beach Boys 65 because Capitol kept calling everything 65 around that time.
I think Brian probably stepped in on that, or at least one of the band's like people did. So yeah, that's the Collaborators.
Yeah, that's part one for the Collaborators. We are going to do a second part of this in the future. Probably in the coming weeks, where we're going to continue and go on from like 68 to the end. So it's going to be interesting to talk about a lot of those guys. You have like Jack Reilly, obviously made some really cool lyrical contributions to some of their early 70s albums. Dennis worked with several significant collaborators. We can talk about them, guys like Greg Jacobson and some of those guys. So we're going to talk about them as well. So there's a lot more, and I'm looking forward to doing that. So thank you everybody for listening to this 8th episode of Good Timin. I hope you all enjoyed the show. I had a great time talking with you guys about all the different collaborators that Brian and the Beach Boys worked with from the early to mid 60s. And I'm looking forward to picking up on this discussion soon and talking about the band's many other collaborators. So as always, if those of you listening like this podcast and want to hear more, feel free to subscribe or follow wherever you're listening. We greatly appreciate the support as it motivates us to make more episodes in the future. Also, as a reminder, the podcast is available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So there's plenty of different ways to listen and keep up with the show. So thank you again for listening, and we will see you all next time. Bye.